Welcome to the Business Spotlight podcast. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your host on today's episode. And today on the show, I have Jon Wolfe, CEO and co-founder of Austin Ketamine Clinic, with me as my guest. We're going to be learning about his business, his journey to business ownership, best practices, and challenges that he's faced to give you that inside look to what it's like to build and operate a business. Welcome, Jon. So nice to meet you, and thanks for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. Well, before we dive into all things business, I'd love to learn a bit about you. So feel free to share a bit about yourself.
All right. Just a small, brief synopsis. Growing up, I was a military kid. We moved around a lot. We finally settled in Round Rock when I was in high school. Went through high school in Round Rock, grew up in the Austin area, went on to start at ACC, became a licensed paramedic. Went on to UT, decided that med school wasn't for me after getting through everything, and worked with the city of Austin as a rescue paramedic for a little over 13 years. Um, Unfortunately, that job takes its toll, and yeah, not everybody can do it for decades on decades. And then that's whenever I had wrapped up my bachelor's degree in EMS, and then I kind of lost focus. I just lost, yeah, my direction whenever I had lost the one thing that I'd been doing forever, and that's all I really knew. So I went back to school like most of us do, and I got my master's in emergency management. And I just happened to stumble into the ketamine industry back in 2018, and they were looking for a paramedic, and I was a paramedic that needed a job, and it was in mental health. And my undergrad thesis and grad thesis were both on first responder mental health and wellness. So that's been a passion of mine throughout my entire career, whether it was EMS or moving into ketamine. From 2018, I stayed with that organization for about a year and recognized the potential and actually the life-saving, yeah, treatment that it provides for a lot of people. And worked for another organization, helped create a couple other ketamine clinics, and then questioned why I didn't just open one myself. And at the time, my partner was encouraging, and we opened up Austin Ketamine together, or Austin Ketamine Clinic. I should differentiate that because there's also another Austin Ketamine specialist in town. But we opened up late 2019, early 2020, right before the pandemic. So if you want to talk about first-time business owners, small business owners, and challenges, we definitely experienced them. And here we are, like 5.5 years later, and I can't be prouder and more grateful.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And just like already, feel like this conversation is there's gonna be so much that we uncover. So thank you for sharing that, and giving us a brief on what you're up to. So now you mentioned a business partner. So how is the ownership structure with your partner? Are you currently 50-50, or how does that look for you?
So it's important in the state of Texas that one understands that according to the Texas Medical Board, a doctor has to own majority of the organization of the clinic. They've got to own 51%, regardless of what joint ownership that is. And there's some semantics about who can and can't be a minority owner, so on and so forth. But essentially, the way we I messed up when we first organized, and it wasn't set up like that. And I didn't have a doctor as a majority owner, which, yeah, the TMB was not very happy with. And we learned our lesson, especially financially, on that one with legal fees and having to pretty much reorganize the structure. So Austin Ketamine Clinic is doing business under Texas Ketamine Wellness, PLLC. and our supervising physician and medical director, she's actually the one that owns the clinic itself. Between that and the partnership that I have with her, which is Texas Psychedelic Therapeutics LLC, I'm the one that runs the operations through a management agreement. It's about the only, I mean, there's, I think, three different ways you can go about developing an organization and creating it so it's not illegal or breaking Texas administrative code or what have you. But it's really important if it's a medical clinic that a doctor owns 51%. But the co-founder that originally started with me, she and I just consolidated and I bought her out. And that was what enabled me to move on to having sole proprietorship over the LLC and being able to partner directly with Dr. Flume.
Okay, so there was an original partner and then you repartnered with Dr. Flume. Okay. Just taking a couple notes.
No, you're good. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing about that too, because that's something, other business owners probably, especially in this field or in the clinical
I
situation.
would say it's in the top five.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
know. And it
Wow.
was over 6 figures in legal fees that we had to spend for that lesson. But I thought, I mean, yeah, if you're
Mm,
not, if you haven't done it before, you haven't experienced this, you're going to make some mistakes. And I've made a plethora of them, but learning from them is the most important part.
definitely. That's a golden nugget of this conversation so far too, is just like having that, keep going, having that grit and finding solutions. And yeah, that's like the journey of a business owner. And so, uh, looking at the clinic, how many do you have like an administrative team as well or employees? Like how does that work and how many employees do you currently have?
So our staff is a very limited staff. We opened with 2 exam rooms intentionally, just because we don't focus on kind of the cattle call, get them in, get them out type of um, organization. Um, with healthcare right now, the most frustrating part that a lot of people express is that they've got a limited amount of time to ask their questions and express their concerns with whomever the healthcare provider is. And that's 100% true. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast. That's just the way things have evolved. And unfortunately, it's out of our control. But what is in our control is the fact that I can regulate the appointment times and how much time we spend with our patients. And that's a huge part of it. And we've got a very small staff because playing round robin with different healthcare providers or other clinics who have therapists on staff or whatever the case may be, when you're talking to 20 different people about something that's a mental health care treatment that's so intimate, it can be a little baffling and you really don't feel that comfort or a sense of ease. And the sense of safety is kind of the cornerstone of why we succeed.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So how big is your staff currently?
So right now I've got 4 mid-level providers, which consist of either a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner. And I've got 5 medics on staff. They're either EMTs, medical assistants, paramedics. I've got one that is about to complete her LVN, so she's kind of in a transitioning stage. But we keep, because I also step in as a medic and help out with the IVs, and I can serve that role if we're short staffed. So I'd say 5 to 6 medics and 2 administrative personnel. One of those is a remote person who can field all the admin stuff whenever the clinic is closed.
Mm.
And
Oh,
then
that
the medical director. That would be,
okay. There's a medical director on staff as well.
yes, ma'am. She's a psychiatrist.
Oh, wonderful. So that actually leads right to the next question about your day to day, because you mentioned stepping in, so it made me think of this question of what is like your typical day to day? Are you working primarily in the business or on the business, or is there kind of like a middle ground that you're doing each day?
So we used to joke as a paramedic, we're kind of a master of none, but jack of all. And I don't disagree with that even to this day. I've got very good skills, but I am a jack of all. And day to day is whatever the day calls for.
Hmm.
And sometimes you can't anticipate something to happen. Somebody cancels, has an emergency, their dog gets hit by a car and they're asking whether they should come get treatment or not. And, if someone calls off sick or they need to leave early for whatever reason, or if the admin is unavailable and I've got to step in and answer the phone, I'll step in and answer the phone. But the main thing is my job is to serve wherever needs to be served. And one of the funny things about it is I don't pay for a cleaning service because my mom taught me how to clean. And I understand that most business owners wouldn't have the time and they don't want to, but I do find it a little cathartic just to be able to check out and just clean at the end of the day and just have a little bit of silence to myself. And I don't know. It's therapeutic in a sense, but as a small business owner, those small areas, and they can even be large areas, are critical to maintaining your balance between personal life, professional life, and not overextending yourself. I'll admit, I think most entrepreneurs are workaholics. I'll just say that much.
Guilty. I completely feel that. It's very true what you said. So thank you for again like sharing a little bit about where you're serving in the business. And then let's kind of take it back. I'd love to learn a little bit about your why. Why how did you come into you had mentioned a little bit of how you got into the ketamine and the clinical side of things, but what was that big inspiration, or was there a big inspiration of, exploring this as the main part of your
Yeah,
business?
that's a great question because it really does hone in on the primary purpose. And that has a lot to do with, the suicide rate for first responders, firefighters, paramedics, police officers across the board is unacceptable.
Mhm.
Just the suicide rates in general, and it's a little um, synchronistic that we're talking in September with suicide prevention or awareness month, however you phrase it, um, being amongst us. But the thing about it is, I lost family members to suicide. I've lost over a handful. I've lost over a handful of team members that were on my rescue team. We only had a team of 35, which that's a fairly large percentage for such a small team. And there were a lot of other things that kind of just built this motivation for me to fill the gap and help connect the resources with the person in need. And when I was with EMS, I got involved in local government politics. Politics is not for me. I'm not a politician. I am an entrepreneur. I'm going to do it the way I think is best fit based on best practices that have been proven in the industry. And we're not pushing volume. So the most important part is, yeah, just kind of staying true to your own mission and not forgetting why you got into it in the first place. Because you won't work a day in your life if you love what you're doing.
That's very true too. And and thank you for sharing your why behind the business. And you'd mentioned like first responders. Is that your primary, like your main client or your, I guess, patients
I
base?
would.
Or like who is kind of your target client?
Um, my target client's different than our actual clientele, unfortunately.
Mm,
I am trying my best. Whenever we talk about it, there's a couple things that I'm working on to change that. But currently, most of our clientele are females, probably 40 to 55.
mm, okay.
And the male female ratio is kind of similar. I'd say it is kind of like a 50-50, give or take 5 to 7%. But it's very close. And the age too. When someone's been struggling for 20 years with depression that hasn't been resolved, they're
Mhm.
looking for anything and they are running out of options. And unfortunately, that is the population that we serve the most. And it is a population that I try to target, but I also think there's a lot more underserved areas that need to be targeted a little bit better.
What are some of those areas that you are referring to?
Um, the affordability and accessibility are the two biggest concepts that we started with and we still try to maintain. And it's so hard to maintain something of affordability when you're in the middle of downtown Austin and you're trying to run a business. That is truly challenging. The other part's malpractice insurance.
Mm,
Malpractice insurance, yeah, it's expensive and there's certain strategies that are employed by other organizations that are larger than us that have sway of influence with lobbyists because we are a threat and we are emerging and we're getting bigger and it works. Sorry, we beat you. But sometimes that influences the insurance industry because if you can't get malpractice insurance, you can't open a clinic.
mhm. Mm. So those are some of the challenges that you're facing right now. Is that like impacting kind of your profit margins or, because to keep the lights on in the business, or is there a certain kind of clientele that you're looking to target like as an addition to who you're currently
The
serving?
first responders,
First responders, yes.
medics, firefighters, and actually, I would like to see more non-Caucasian patients
Mhm.
because that affordability factor goes all the way across the board. And Caucasians are not the only people that suffer from mental health illness.
That's very important that you brought that up. Thank you for sharing that. Just for essence of time, um, I'd love to see because I mean, I could really deep dive into this with you. But just for essence of time to get into kind of like where you see the company growing to in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
So currently what we're working on is expansion to a second clinic. And that second clinic is going to be nearby just for logistical planning purposes. It'll just make it a little bit smoother
Mhm.
because when you initially open it, you can share staff. Um, we're finally incorporating our nonprofit, which is hashtag painting for PTSD and the Wolf Foundation.
Mm.
And that's that was my bread and butter, and that's the legacy that I want to leave after everything's said and done. So whenever we get to that point, I will be extremely ecstatic if that continues and is able to get back to the community, whether it's just subsidizing treatments, um, giving scholarships, or just putting on community events. Whenever I worked for EMS, we had a community outreach program that we all had to volunteer for because it wasn't in the budget. But that's one of the things. And I am writing a book that's from ketamine to or from code blue to ketamine.
Mm.
And that is kind of yeah, it's going to be an emotional book. So I will say that ahead of time. And that's kind of how I am sharing my stories that I've experienced because the power in growth is in one story, especially if you've got a success story. And let me say this, one that you didn't pay for, their testimonial.
Mm. Mhm.
It's extremely important on our business ethics because the moral compass is what guides our operations and protocols along with best evidence practices. But within the next 3 to 5 years, the growth for the industry is just over the top. We're
Mhm.
already adding additional services, but the metric on how far we grow or how fast we grow and how much money we make is going to be based off the service that we're giving to our patients. If that
Mhm.
sacrifices, everything else gets put on pause. Whether it was the 3 year plan, it may be the 10-year plan at that point, but sustainability is the most important factor. If you continue to keep pushing forward, you'll eventually turn a profit. And fortunately, I don't have any outstanding debt.
Mhm.
There's zero that besides my rent and utilities monthly, but that was the other thing. Start lean, do, yeah, do all your homework, do your research, and don't open during a pandemic.
Yeah, that's definitely was, such a interesting time and challenge for businesses. And, kind of looking at, you mentioned a few great things here that you're working on and building. I want to ask you a question about it's thinking about like if you had a magic wand and
Mhm.
you could rapidly improve one aspect of your business, what would it be?
It'd be the nonprofit organization because that's what's going to help fund scholarships and subsidies for patient care. And it also is going to help fund us being able to do community outreach events. Um, I mean, Thursdays were closed, so once a month on Thursdays, I'm gonna move all the furniture out of our living room. By the way, it's not a typical clinic. It looks like an apartment, like you're going over to a friend's house.
Mhm.
But I promise you, once you go in the exam room, you'll be like, all right, they know what they're doing. They've got legitimate equipment and everybody's professional, clinically speaking. But yeah, just being able to do that and then open up a couple other locations because that's the accessibility. And when we opened, there were only 4 other ketamine clinics in Austin, and now there's over a dozen. So it's definitely growing and franchising while maintaining the core moral compass of the mission, vision, values is what I would do with that magic wand.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Do you have any idea of how many uh, locations you're kind of looking at, like of launching, and how many staff members would you need to grow for that to find success?
One thing that I did early on was buy up a whole bunch of domain names. That way it would give me options to go wherever my heart chose or wherever, and I could start kind of just planting the seed and then scooping up potential in the future. And that's paid off tremendously. San Miguel's one, Kona's one, um, Dripping Springs between here in San Antonio, whether it be like New Braunfels, Kyle, San Marcos, in between here and Bastrop. So there's not really much between here and Bastrop besides one or two other clinics, and I don't necessarily rave over how they do their operations. So I know that we could definitely move into that geographical area and do well. But even all the way up to Dallas and outside of Texas. So
Sky's the limit.
we
Uh,
really, especially with all the other psychedelics that are being studied right now. Fortunately, our medical director, she's also married to another psychiatrist. So that'll help delineate some of that separation of responsibilities if we do get another clinic and it may be a different service line that we're offering, but just pre-planning that one is the most important part.
well, John, this has been such a great conversation. I would love to connect our audience with how to find you. So feel free to share, how can folks connect with you and your business online?
Absolutely. Our website is austinketamineclinic.com. We've got an Instagram page, austinketamineclinic.com or no.com. And then every other handle, same thing for TikTok, Facebook, all the social media handles. I don't post a whole lot because I'm typically busy helping run the clinic every day. So I do have a couple of people that help me with marketing, but that's the best way. Our telephone number is the other one, 512-744-5489.
Oh, thank you so much, John. For our final question today, what is most inspiring to you today?
Um, just the opportunity to share my journey and my experience with others. And it's not, my objective wasn't to set out to increase, yeah, marketing from that standpoint, but I encourage all of our patients, if you're going to share your story, please do so. It's important. And that's the one thing that I came to terms with at EMS to not get burnt out was just finding value and joy in everybody else's story and their journey because it's important. I use the phrase, we all have a backpack of bullshit. It's just filled with different traumas. I don't know if you can use that, but anyways, it's just filled with different traumas. It doesn't mean yours is any less or any worse or anything like that, but this is my story and I just want people to hear my story and know that there is still hope and the light may be dim and small, but it's there.
Wow, and definitely can use that. That is a great mantra. So but thank you, John, for just taking the time to talk with me today and share your story.
Absolutely. Thank you.